As we know, wristwatch companies like to associate themselves with all kinds of adventurous activities such as diving, climbing, exploring, and expensive lifestyles. Another approach is celebrities and movies. James Bond has been a lucrative arrangement for both Rolex and Omega, and it's no accident when you do see a Hamilton watch in the latest mind-bending Chris Nolan movie. Let's not forget that the Rolex Daytona was a forgotten and ignored model that deals couldn't get rid of until a certain Paul Newman received one from his wife. Clearly, there is one association money can't buy, and that's a celebrity wearing something because they prefer it, and doing so in everything from photo shoots to movies simply because they happen to really like it. Steve McQueen is sometimes referred to as the king of cool. And if you've seen the original and best Thomas Crown affair, then you'll know why. The actor loved his Hanhart EOS 417 and wore it often. Google the actor and the watch and you'll see countless examples. I contracted to another channel a few years ago and filmed a couple of Hanhart watches. I found them a bit unusual with an emphasis on stopwatches and a big red button for the chronograph. I appreciated the workmanship, but the brand did little for me. That all changed when they re-released the 417 with an era-specific logo, manual movement, and that cool Bund strap. They took a bit of a chance doing so since there was never an agreement with the actor, meaning they could not use any references to him to market this new watch. So in a way, they're hoping that this release will stand on its own four legs, without any association, or perhaps even relying on people such as myself to constantly go on about their connection to an actor that died over 40 years ago. Should you consider one for your collection? Stick around and let's check it out in detail. If this is the first time you come across my channel, thank you so much for stopping by. It will be really appreciated if you liked and subscribed. Thank you so much in advance. This Hanhart is my very own watch. I almost bought one a few years ago when the 42mm was released, but held off for various reasons. When the more era-accurate new model sized at 39mm was released, I was even more tempted, but again held off. But when a friend of mine needed to free up some cash for a new purchase and the 39 was on offer, I couldn't refuse. Well, my wife advised me that I absolutely could refuse, but what does she know about sensible money management? Except everything. So let's get stuck into the sizes here. The diameter is 39mm and lug to lug is 45.8mm. It's a rather robust thickness of 13.3mm, and worth pointing out is that the actual dial size is just around 30mm, and I'll come back to that. An appropriate upgrade from the original is a domed sapphire crystal and a 10 ATM water resistance. This gorgeous dial is what is most noticeable. All text, numbers and details are printed. Like I mentioned, what really grabbed me was the old historical logo. I think it's just gorgeous, and it almost reminds me a little bit of J.J. Lecoult's logo, with his long line connecting one end to the other. It's in use on the buckle, the case back, and also the sign crown, so consistent throughout. This is obviously a chronograph with a small seconds dial on the left, with a continuously moving seconds hand being a simple stick, and a 30-minute counter on the right with an arrow-like tip. A school of thought is that the 30 minutes is easier to see on a small dial than a 60-minute, which I happen to agree with. All numbers are era specific, and again, to my eyes at least, very attractive. The minute and hour hands, as well as the large seconds hand, has plenty of lume, as do the digits. This is interesting to me since their German compatriots Sinn and Damasco have pretty ordinary lume application in my experience. I'll return to the lume a bit later. Surrounding the dial is the fluted bezel, which is a so-called friction bezel, which basically means it flows freely in both directions. The only detail on the bezel is a red mark, which you could line up with a target or halfway mark. The bezel is very easy to move though, so I definitely want to hold it like a stopwatch rather than have it sit on my wrist in the unlikely event that I would time something that mattered with the bezel marker. The pushes on the side of the case are quite simply the best pushes I've ever used. They are so robust and have such a good feel, it's addictive to say the least to constantly play around with them. As per normal, the top one starts and stops the last second's hand, and the bottom one resets this flyback chronograph. It's simply brilliant in operation. The cyan push-pull crown is a tad small for me. I could use a slightly longer one, as in sticking out another millimeter or so, particularly since this is a manual one movement, so you will be using it all the time. But it's not a deal breaker by any means. The case itself is your normal downward sloping lugs that are mostly brushed but a few polished bevels here and there. It's nice enough, but not designed to be too eye-catching, since Lord knows there's enough to feast your eyes on here. Flipping the watch over, we get an exemplary minimalistic screw-in case back, with the historical logo once again, and manufactured in Germany in German. I love it, and if you never take the watch off to include a Bund strap, you'll never see this, which is a real shame. One thing I noticed is that the logo is recessed in what looks like a reasonable 1mm or so into the back, and I wonder if the whole watch could be a mil thinner if this was avoided. Within beats the Sellita SW510M, which is a manual wound movement with 58 hours power reserve when fully wound. If the feel of the push is any indication of quality, then I believe that this movement is very robust, and being a Sellita movement should be easy to have serviced without having to send it back to Germany. As I mentioned, I've handled Hanhart watches before, and the leather used in their straps was always of a very high quality, and so is this. It smells fantastic, is very soft and smooth, and even has Alcantara material on the back of the leather straps and the patch that makes up the Bund strap, which makes it incredibly soft for your wrist. One small thing, as far as I can tell, it's one length only, and it is a tad short for my 19cm wrist with the leather underlay attached, which is a shame. I was going to take it off this leather underlay, but honestly it looks pretty cool, so for now it stays put. That said, it takes it to a thickness of around 15mm, which is a bit much, so it will eventually come off, and I think due to this and the tight fit lengthwise. An interesting detail is that the Bund straps were issued to German aviators, and the name Bund strap hails from the German name for the armed forces, Bundeswehr. It makes a lot of sense as a feature for military use, since it can absorb both sweat and generally isolate steel from skin in cold and hot weather. So let's check out the Lume. It is better than I expected, as I mentioned. The Hanhart 417 ES was a pilot's chronograph made for the German armed forces from the mid-1950s, and it was based on the criteria of being robust, reliable and legible. The purpose of the 417 was uncompromising use on pilots' wrists. Hanhart supplied the German armed forces with the chronograph for almost 10 years, but having it back to grace our wrists in the 2020s is a huge win for us. I'll be honest, it felt a bit small for me first, but that's due to the dial being quite small within the case, more so than the overall size itself. I've gotten used to it, and I'm glad I got this and not the 42mm version. That said, it could be a little thinner perhaps. I'm not sure what your opinion of the overall package is, but mine is made up. I think it's incredibly attractive, and a vintage reissue with tons of style that looks like nothing else out there. At this point, I very much feel that this is a permanent entry into my collection, and I'd wear it with a jeans and t-shirt or business attire. I mean, if it was good enough for the king of cool, then it's probably good enough for me also. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.